Hi, my name is Rosalinda, and I'm on global role project is part of my social work program. I'm in a master's social work program, and one of the things we were asked this week to discuss is a community social issue. So the issue that I want to address this week is addressing domestic violence here in Stanislaus County and the City of Ceres, which is where I reside. So everything that you will see in here are actually lived experience and information I've obtained to address in my situation. And yes, most of the pictures will actually be lived experience as well. This first thing that I want to discuss is domestic violence. So one of them is domestic violence is a critical social justice here in the community. It undermines individuals, families, and the community. Some of the negative impacts is the fact that it has on children and the well-being of everyone involved. The loss of wages for the victims because a lot of them are having to not miss work, court cases, medical costs, court and legal appointments. Some of them are losing their housing, so some people are, losing, having nowhere to go or to become unsheltered. And then there's also the financial instabilities. There are some laws, which I will cover shortly, regarding financial workplace protections. So, what exactly is domestic violence? And there comes a variety of forms. There's so many different ways of abuse. So one is molesting, annoying, attacking, striking, stalking, threatening, sexual assault, battery, harassment, or destroying personal property. In my case, all of this I think happened. So almost all of it. I was struck. You see here, where I was attempted to be suffocated. So you can see my eyes broken there, the vessel in my eye from the amount of pressure that was put on my face. If you saw the full face fissure, where you'll see the dislocated jaw, the nose, and other things that were happening. So what else is threatening? So if you've gone on to some of my social media, you'll see the video in which he said that it's not a threat, it's a promise. I will kill you if you don't kill yourself first. So the battery, the harassment, even after the restraining order, I continued to get phone calls. He continued to come to my house after he'd been served with a restraining order. So there are, those things. And then also destroying my personal property. So even while I was trying to get him out, he still destroyed property that belonged to me. And he felt he was entitled to do that. So those are just different things because they felt entitled. But I saw with my experience, everyone's situation is going to be different because their abuse is going to be different and take on different forms. So it's important to know that there's not a one shape fits all when it comes to domestic violence in our community. So when it comes to domestic violence, like I said, in the community, it is a critical social justice issue. It undermines the individual's families and the communities. So it can lead to social consequences. So the consequences to the community, such as impacting a child, which are children's well-being, the future. That's what it's affecting. It's affecting the parent, the one, the abuser, and the one that's a victim. So all of that's going to affect them. It's going to affect the loss of wages for the victim, and they have to go into hiding, especially if their abuser is trying to attack them or kill them. Because usually we see a lot of violence happening in the first 2 years after a victim tries to escape. And in fact, it usually can result in death. So those are key issues that we need to consider. The loss of housing. So maybe they can no longer afford the house that they were in. Maybe they're homeless completely. And with the current situation that we have in the housing industry now, that can be very, very critical, especially if your area is in an area that doesn't have enough housing for the community already. We also deal with abusers generally have a pattern. So generally this isn't going to be the first time, occasionally it might be. For mine, it had happened repeatedly. So not only to me, but also in the past. So of course, I didn't know that. There are ways that you can find some of that out. Not all of it's going to be public information. So, and I'll go into that shortly about that, as well as the physical and wellness. So it's going to affect your physical and mental wellness and your health. And so it's important that we work on finding ways to address some of that as well as the financial stability. So some of them may end up having to go on government assistance to accommodate their situations. They may have lost a significant impact to their household. So the realities of this in our community, so again, this is Stanislaus County, which is where I reside, is that criminal charges can encourage someone to get treatment for substance abuse and anger management. Because we often find that abusers are not always remorseful. They don't really, often they're making comments like they deserved it. I don't think anyone deserves to have anyone have their hands put on them. I don't think that anyone should be entitled to rights. I don't think anyone else's family or even teenagers. So just if your situation isn't working, it doesn't mean you have to be entitled to whatever that person has that you want. Others relate to substance abuse. Of course, mine was not related to substance abuse or drug use. This was just me not being able to deal with it. So one situation was different than other households, but that is one situation that we see frequently. The next thing is domestic violence here in Stanislaus County, which is where I reside. The sheriff did see an increase of 21%. I'll go over those numbers in a minute. And what I found an interesting fact, which is directly how it affects us in our communities, is 50% of the cases did not go into prosecution. So regardless of the facts or the information or anything else that was presented, whether it was video or pictures presented online, it ended up not being prosecuted, at least as of now. Now, they did see if they did prosecute, often in with video. So and I'll go over some of the consequences here shortly, but I found it very interesting. So out of looking at the numbers, if in fact that they had 3,000 calls, so we're going to go with 2022 just because those are the highest numbers. Or we'll go 2023. So we had 2,700, just over that, right? Phone calls or calls in to our 911 dispatch for domestic violence. As you can see, about half of those involved weapons. Okay. Now, when it came to my city alone, we had 187 calls when I pulled up this information off of the Attorney General's website. And out of 187 domestic violence calls, every single one of them included a weapon, whether it was a knife, a gun, a bat, some kind of weapon was being used in that situation. And 8 of the calls of those 187 include strangulation or attempted strangulation. So I think that's important to call because that's a serious for suffocation, strangulation or suffocation. Ours in our case came with strangulation. So to me, that's serious. So much weapons have been around for you. But with I said, these are the numbers again for the county, for the county, because the numbers are county-wise. We don't have a city less than 50,000, so my numbers aren't going to be the same the entire county. But I think it's important to look at the increase in weapons. And you can see the weapons from this domestic violence has increased, although our numbers are going down a little bit. I don't know how much of that is real because I know mine, I didn't call the police because I knew the consequences would be severe. So even though he was trying to suffocate me, they pulled the knife out, they call, I dare you, right? So you don't call. Mine didn't go in. So these are things to think about when we look at the numbers and we are as a society because there's people that are walking around. You may not realize why they're walking around, how they're feeling, and it's because of these things. So let's just kind of go into the framework. So I mentioned there are some laws to protect victims and even potential. So the first one is the Family Violence Protection Service Act, and this is regarding providing federal shelter and services. So this is a federal mandate. It's an act that was passed to require federal services for shelters, and this is going to be throughout the nation. Now, does every community have one? Unfortunately, we don't. And they're not all easily accessible. So I was really surprised on the amount of numbers because in California, there's somewhat at least one in every county. In some counties, there's multiple. But so I was a little surprised. We have one in my county. There are some counties that have one in one. There's the one north of Violencein County that has several. So when I go in other counties, I'm surprised when we don't have it. The other one's Marcy's Law, and this one I found out when I filed charges and brought evidence, both the strangulation as well as the attempted, as well as the multiple violations of the restraining order. So each time he violated the restraining order, I got another Marcy's Law flyer in the mail or handed to me, and it provided me contact information. Does this mean they're being prosecuted? No. Does this mean that things are going to change? No, not at all. All it did was a right to know the rights that I have and the contact person. So it gave me the district attorney's phone number. Does it mean they're going to do anything? No, did not. It also gave me the phone number, which is great. Answer the phone. We're just being honest. So, there's different things. The police department found that out, which is great because they did take place, of course. But it doesn't mean that things going to be changed. Nothing's going to get changed with Marcy's law. It just gives you the contact information. Where is this shelter? What is the shelter in your community? What's in your shelter? What's the contact phone number for the domestic violence? Where can you go or where can you go for services such as counseling or trauma therapy? I luckily have insurance that was able to provide me with a trauma therapist with lived experience who has been very helpful in the healing process because, again, you have to work through, especially the side effects of domestic violence and the verbal abuse. The external scars will heal, um, but most of the time, depending on how severe the incident was. So that will heal up, but it's the internal scars that often take longer to heal. The lack of trust, the lack of self-esteem, the ability to accept the situation and move on, because often there is no closure. So the one I want to touch on is Claire's laws, and this is somewhat new. And what it does is it allows someone to go into the county if you have the person's name and date of birth and critical information. You can go in and say, hey, Claire's law allows me to find out if basically this person has a record of domestic violence or assault. Again, this does not count non charges. So in my case, I believe there's 5 case numbers right now, including the domestic violence as well as the violations of the restraining order. Some date back 2 years, some date back 2 weeks. So with that, if someone walked in right now and says, hey, can I get this information on so-and-so, here's their information, such as maybe his current girlfriend, right? You go in and ask this information, it's not going to come up because no charges have been filed. Does that mean no charges will ever be filed? No. I mean, technically, the district attorney has a year to decide whether they want to press charges, but the longer the wait, the less likely it's going to be a conviction. Even I know that. So it's important to look at that and consider that. But it's important to know because you know what? Even if there's not going to be charges brought forward, at least you know whether this information someone was able to get that conviction. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of the and that you have the right to know. So go to your police department and see if there's anything on the record. Each department is going to be different. Each one's going to provide you different information. But keep that in mind because you do have a right. Now the penal codes. Now I had mentioned before that there are a variety of penal codes. And what I found most interesting is that most of these are misdemeanors. Most of them have up to a year. And when you look at some of this, you're just like, wow, that's it, right? Um, so the first one is the infliction of force or violence to an intimate partner. So this is basically just the basic level of domestic violence, pushing, shoving, leaving out bruises that are visible. And it's up to a 2,000 fine and up to a year in county jail. What is really happening is they're plea bargaining and give them 60 days in probation with a $200 fine, right? They're getting the slap on the hand if they even decide to prosecute. They haven't done anything in my case since some of this, like I said, happened 2 3 weeks ago. Nothing. And then there's the corporal punishment. This is when there's actual trauma. So like my black eye, my dislocated jaw, my nose, all of that stuff. The most he can get is 4 years in prison. That's it. It took me longer to heal in my eyes from the emotional and physical trauma that was inflicted on me while he tried to suffocate me. But that's where it comes from, right? And it's really amazing when you look at that. And it's up to a $4,000 or $6,000 fine. But in reality, what are those medical costs if I would have been able to get to the hospital or an ambulance? $6,000 doesn't even cover the cost of the physical damage and what it would have cost to have, the x-ray on my jaw and my nose and all the other stuff that I ended up being able to fix on my own or deal with, right? And the swelling went down and I was eventually able to talk again. But again, all of that I had to deal in the privacy. And then the other one I want to talk about on this slide is the criminal threats. So threat for death. And yes, I did get a phone call approximately 2 months ago where he called and said, you'll be dead. Obviously not in that tone and not quite those words. There were some other words associated with that, which I won't use online, but the threat of killing me. And he said I'd be dead in a week. And for the most part, there's I can do it. So I reported it, got another police report. Did the county convict or press charges? No, they didn't, even though there's a record of being called. Did they even contact him or investigate? They didn't. Do you think they reached out to T-Mobile to see if they can pull his records to prove that he called me? No, they don't bother. So I think that's important to know. And even if he did, and they did, and they were going to convict him on this, um, on a misdemeanor part of it, it's 1 year in county jail. A felony is up to 4 years and $10,000. But what I find interesting is just telling me you're going to kill me versus actually attempting when you do the bodily harm, right, where he's suffocating me. That's 4 years. But telling me you were going to suffocate me, it's 4 years as well. But the fine is 10,000 instead of six. Um, so I found that very interesting. But I do like the fact this one, at least, is a strike under California's three strikes law. Although I think the corporal injury to a spouse or cohabitant should be as well. But again, that's a different discussion at different times. So I think it's important to look at these and keep that in mind when you're looking and considering this. So I do have some more here. So this is just the engagement and intent to cause fear, right? To family by making threats. Again, felony 16 months. Right? It seems it's just basically. What we're finding is there is some challenges with prosecution, despite the existence of having penal codes to make all of this domestic violence illegal. We're seeing that they're still not prosecuting. In my county, it's less than 50% of cases being prosecuted. But what they're saying is for their reasoning, because of course that's what's used for. Why are you charging people? One of them, they're saying that they just don't have enough resources to investigate and prosecute people, so they just don't have the time or the money. That's not where the big money is for them, I guess. Obviously they have murders and other crimes to investigate, and vicious assaults, and I want to say that doesn't happen. We have family issues going on as well, child issues, and I understand that, but I also think that there needs to be justice for everyone, and maybe that's something we need to look at the state level. We also see victims are scared because I expect retaliation, right? Most victims are being killed or kidnapped or disappearing in the first 2 years. The first 2 years are the most dangerous part after a domestic violence situation. And I see that myself. So anytime my name comes up in his life, I know this is back what he does where his anger management issue becomes an issue for me. And so we're finding victims are reluctant to testify because they know what the consequences are. If they get arrested, what's going to happen when they get bail? What do you think they're going to go looking for? They're not going to be looking for their mom and dad. They're going to come looking and be angry at the person that took them back. And that's going to be one of the key issues. Another issue is the challenges of having significant evidence. For me, I was really appalled by some of the comments that I was told by my own police department, such as, well, do you have video of him trying to suffocate you? I have the audio because one of the cameras was triggered by my cat in the other room, so I have the audio of it. But do I have the video? No, I don't have the video. And if I did have the video, like if I have a dash or some kind of body camera on me, like the police do you think he was going to allow me to wear that while he attacks me? Of course not. So I was really, I don't even know how to say how I felt when the police department goes, well, do you have photos of the attacks? Really? Like, so if I don't have video of him attacking, then it didn't happen. And to me, I found that crazy because we have less evidence that's required for a blood fight or someone, hitting the back of your car and leaving. So technically, that's a hit. It's a felony as well. But you don't have to have video of the car hitting you. So it's just like, huh? And there are some videos that I actually have. And if you look on my site, you'll see that I have some YouTube videos and on TikTok and some of the other social media outlets of him actually like trying to throw a bag full of cans, like vegetable cans at me, and trying to attack me and pictures of that kind of stuff. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't what they want. That wasn't enough for them. In fact, the police didn't even investigate that case, even though I had the video evidence. I told them I had the video evidence. So a lot of that goes down to the victim. So when they responded to me, they said, well, Why don't you go find your own place to stay if you feel that fearful? Mind you, I owned my home before I even met this individual. I lived in my house before I met this, years before I met this individual and had him moved in. So I'm supposed to leave a house that I pay 100% and to rent it. I'm supposed to live here, leave my house that I paid for, that's in my name, to this individual. For what? This, this is my house. This is the house that I bought. And you want me to leave? So I was really perplexed about the victim blaming that came from my own police department, which is obviously not going to happen now, but at least not to me. And it's part of the reason why I ran for city council because I want to hold my police accountable. I want to know why they treated domestic violence victims the way they treated me. And they have now reviewed a lot of my videos that I have of the attacks, some of the audio I have of some of the attacks, pictures I have of my bruises. So we can retrain the police in my local department on how to treat people like me. It's not okay to treat victims the way they treat. And then lastly, one of the other reasons is the priorities of other cases, because we do have some serious cases out there that are going on, right? So it's important for them, anyways, to get the most bang out, out of the buck, I guess. So get the most convictions they can get, and the easy to convict cases when it comes to homicides and murders and those kind of prosecutions. Those are a lot easier, possibly to prove in some cases. But the failure to prosecute the abusers. So in the event like my case, where they're not going after the abuser, they basically make the victim, such as myself, feel like I'm at risk. As long as he's walking the streets, every woman that meets this man is at risk of his anger, of his outbreaks, or whatever he wants to do or feels that he's entitled to do to them. So he's still walking the streets. Our community is not going to be safe if he has an anger issue. And really, what it sends a message to the abusers is they're immune from prosecution. There's no consequences for not following society's rules. And that's a huge issue because it impacts us. So I think that's important to remember when it comes to the penal codes and the failure of my own district attorney to prosecute domestic violence cases, because it sends a message that this kind of behavior is okay. I mentioned earlier about the workplace safety. Victims are having to take time from work, whether it's getting the restraining order. In my case, I had to pull the papers, I had to file the papers, you had to go back to get the papers, you had to get the sheriff to serve them, and you had to, file the, proof of service. Then you're going to the court date, and then again, if they didn't show up for the court date, then you have to serve them again. And even with mine, if you still didn't leave, it didn't matter. So the one thing I can tell you is California law does allow the victim's protections. So I could use sick and vacation time, personal leave, or comp time if that was available to take time off to address whether it's the court dates, or any of that other time to receive services, counseling, medical services, healthcare issues, seek medical attention. So most companies, I'm obviously not the smaller companies, but most companies that are over 25 do have to provide that for you in California. Now, employees do have the right for reasonable workplace accommodations. Again, it's going to be based on where you work, because obviously, if you're in a small mom pop, an average small store, they may not be able to do that. So if you work, I'm just going to use like a local fast food restaurant. They may have more than 25 employees at this restaurant or fast food location, but they may not have another safe location for you to work at that store. So you may have to switch stores. So those are things for me that meant I would have to switch departments. And then I had to say, was I wanting to switch departments? Because I love where I work and I love what I do. Especially as a certified success coach. So my job is to help others be successful, and that's ultimately what I want to do. You can, have to get new locks if you're able to switch shifts. So maybe you are working fast food, maybe it's being the morning person, now you're the night person. But again, that's going to work. Is it going to even work for you? Because, maybe you have small children that are in school and you can only work out at school. So those are, again, going to be accommodations. You have to decide whether, one, the employer is able to accommodate you, such as maybe you work at a school and you're not able to work the night shift. Can you or can they? The other thing is maybe a change in your phone number extensions or looking at transfer, which obviously I wasn't interested in because I really like them and what I do. So those are different things to look at and to consider based on that. And that's more information is available on the California Commissioner's Office if you want to see what is available in California. So now in my area, in my Stanislaus County, we have the women's group. It's actually not even a women's Cambridge Center in narcissistic picture, but it's called Healthy Alternatives to Violent Environments. And it's open to everyone of all genders or gender identity. And that's because physical assault and sex trafficking happens to everybody regardless of their age, so our gender. So it's important that we do have a shelter available for those that are being hunted. So that those that don't have some of the capabilities that I have in my situation, such as right now I have cameras outside my house, I have cameras inside my house. I have at my workplace, I have sergeants or off-duty police officers that work as security. So I have police or sheriff, right, that are available pretty quickly in my area. So I have a very pretty safe area when it comes to situations like that. So it's important that we have survivors have a safe place, especially those that are being hunted. For me, I continue to get, like I said, I was told I was going to be dead. I was told he was going to kill me. And this isn't the first time. In the past, he also had his cousin do the same, which I have the video of as well, the audio of her calling me. But again, these are different things that we have to consider. At what point do you need to be hidden because you're being hunted? Now, the good thing is the shelter, which is provided under federal law, does provide some shelters, food, clothing, counseling, case management, and restraining order assistance. Again, the restraining order is as good as a paper is printed on. It cannot protect you. It does not stop a bullet. It does not stop a knife. It does not stop a car if they're trying to run you over. It does not stop you from trying to do something or hurting you. So that's important to remember. It hasn't stopped mine from calling. It hasn't stopped him from trying to see me. It hasn't stopped him from stalking my Facebook or his girlfriend that he has from trying to follow my Facebook, figure out where I'm at, what social media am I on, what am I saying, what am I doing, what am I showing. They're very, very interested in your life, especially if it's a situation like mine. So with that said, this is one way of trying to protect yourself. And each time like they violate it, like I mentioned, this violation of the restraining order is a misdemeanor, which our current case, 50% of them aren't being prosecuted, so it may not really matter too much. But again, it doesn't necessarily give you the justice, but it allows you to at least feel like you're standing up for your rights and putting up your boundaries for your own safety. But it offers community awareness. They offer a lot of community awareness to reduce the stigma and to advocate for the victims. We think it's important because there is some kind of stigma that's still attached to it. So it's important that we look and address that and see what we can do so people are willing to report incidents of domestic violence and not let it go unsaid and not giving the person the help that they need. Because I think that's important that they have that. So that's what Stanislaus Justice Center. So the Justice Center is available for children, families, and members of the community to advocate for the victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And it's free, and I think that's really important. And they offer advocates so that you have support and you want someone who's kind of staying there and just filtering it. Just to kind of have a friend if you feel like you're in isolation. They can also help with safety planning, which is very key. Especially if you can't go to shelter or there's not availability or you have children, whatever the situation is, you can't. How can you safely get out? And that's something that I had to do. I did for myself. I actually took a domestic violence class at the local community college to kind of get a better understanding of the cycle. And then I went from there and created a safety plan. How can I get out safely, even with a restraining order, because he wasn't going and he wasn't interested in it. They did offer counseling services, but I was able to get counseling services through my counselor or through my healthcare provider. And then I was able to get connected with a trauma therapist, which is really nice to have someone with lived experience, someone who's been through it, someone who also did not get nothing happened to the person that victimized them. So although that's unfortunate, it's someone that understands my situation and also has the resources that I need. And then also being referred to shelters and Now, when it comes to policy changes, there's clearly policy changes, and I think I kind of made my feelings very clear when I went through and did my research. But I think policy support and involvement is important in implementing some of the first changes and supporting victims of themselves, and minimizing the impact of future victims. Because if these future victims go and pull Claire's Law and go to the police department and say, hey, this so and so, here's their information, do they have a background? They're going to pull the background and there's no conviction. And why don't there convictions? Because, like that, for me right now, there's 5 police reports. They're not being prosecuted. So the current person who's with right now, if they were to go down there right now and ask, there's no conviction. And why is that? Because the district attorney hasn't charged. Do I have videos and pictures? Yes, I do. Do I have phone records showing that he called me in violation of restraining order? Yes. Does it show that? And I'm happy to turn over my records as well to show that I haven't called, texted, nothing. That's the goal. That's the whole point of restraining orders, to have no contact both ways. Doesn't mean they don't stalk you. They're stalking on social media, but for the most part, are used for workers and friends and family. So please know that that is very, very common. But I think it's important that we strengthen our legal protections. I think it's important that we strengthen and support our victims to minimize the impact. I think it's important that we increase our consequences for violations. If they're strangling members of our community, we need to say that's not okay. It's not okay to hurt somebody else because you cannot control your anger. You need to walk away. Maybe you need to count to 10. All the things that we teach our children growing up. You don't act that way. Let me help you, show you how to deal with your anger. And one of them snaps striking out. But some people don't realize that, and I think it's important. We also need to increase funding in education. So this could be from training, outreach, shelters, education. And we also need to make sure the community is aware, because there's a lot of a social stigma on domestic violence, saying, well, why'd you stay? I had a knife stuck to me. I had a knife put into my side of my chest, saying, I'm going to stab you, stab you in the heart, stab you in the chest, or stab you in the lungs, you're going to die. You can't just walk away. And especially if you know that there's a risk of, usually the first 2 years after leaving, you're generally going to be, the risk increases for being killed. You can't just safely walk away like you would in a normal relationship. And if you haven't been in one of these relationships, be very thankful you haven't had to live with this type of situation. I lived with this situation. I never knew what day it was going to stop. I never knew when I was going to be pushed up against a wall. I never knew when I was going to be yelled at. I did not know when I was going to be told, just kill yourself because no one wants you here. You're better off dead. And those are the words that I was told. Those are words that sting. Um, those are things that leave bruises, whether it's on the outside or the inside of your skin. I didn't know when he was going to freak out and try to hit me or stop me. He even did it while I was driving, turn around, socked me in the eye. Who does that, right? I'm driving the car you're in, and you literally, I'm on a very busy street, and you turn around and you're arguing with me because I didn't want to stop. I just wanted to go home. And you want me to stop at all these different stores for your personal benefit. And I said, no. And you turn around and just sock me. And you throw lunch in my face that I bought for you. And you sock and throw it at me, and you sock me in the face. And then you throw food because I bought, a fast food for breakfast for us. And you throw it on the front windshield. So now I can't see because now I have the insides of a burger on the windshield. And he's like rubbing the bun, all the condiments of the bun into the windshield. So I couldn't see. So I'm literally trying to pull over on a very busy street. There's no consequences. Like, there's nothing you can do. You think anyone called 911 while I was crying? Well, I have it. I'm dealing with crap all over my car and him yelling and screaming. One victim asked me for any help, and I said, yes, can you call the police? He got out of the car and said, bro, you better not. The guy took off running. And so it's just, those are the things we have to think about when we're in these situations, because they don't care. They're not going to take responsibility for their actions. And no matter what, it's freely said. When you're dealing with someone like this. Now, is everyone like this? Not everyone's violent. Some people are true, and some people don't have these behaviors. And I'm only talking about, in my case, my situations and the stuff that I've learned in my program when it comes to dealing with advocacy in the community and the impacts it has on violence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own survivor story. So I met this individual. He was very charming, very and he eventually came to stay with me. I thought the relationship flourished. I really thought he cared enough, or I was mistaken by his narcissistic, what appears to be narcissistic tendencies. He was never diagnosed. I can only use the behavior patterns that I saw. The love bombing began, which kind of obscured the anger, the infidelity, the betrayal that I was dealing with his nature. Once I uncovered his unfaithfulness, his reactions were not of remorse, but rather of gaslighting and rage. He would verbally escalate. His verbal abuse and comments escalated to violence. First, I remember him putting his hand around my neck. The next time was my face. Which then, obviously, the rest of the afternoon. I simply kept that until and this continued. Can't get out. And with the pattern, it's always like that. He'd come in and not necessarily apologize, say what happened, promises to change, create confusion and false hope. You know what? Let's go to Disney. You know what? Let's go to Seattle. You know what? Let's go to wherever, right? Wherever I wanted to go. He even brought me a promise ring. Obviously, never to do it again. He was never going to cheat on me. But you know what? Despite my dislocated jaw, black eye, and then self-worth, the child continued. So there were struggles. So the abuse didn't cease. The physical and the emotional trauma continued. His words just spoke deeper than the physical strikes. This is the one person that I trusted, right? So he continued to value me, says Jessica, at one point that I took my mind. When I turned to the police to help, every officer that arrived seemed to minimize my suffering. Only the victim blamed me instead of holding him accountable. They would tell me to leave my house alone, shifting responsibility of the violence and the behavior onto me. The systematic failures is what I encountered was demoralizing. I lost count on how many times I wished I was dead, which he frequently encouraged. When I finally had the courage to contact the police about the abuse, it was disheartening. They indicated that to press charges I needed video evidence, not just audio and pictures. They continued with death threats, the repeated text message, the online messages that he was sending me to hurt me, as well as third parties, which is a violation of the restraining order. They just dismissed categories as misdemeanor, too trivial to even prosecute. Today he reigns free, living without consequences, while I still endure the emotional and physical scars that comes with domestic violence. The struggle is not just a personal battle, though. It just highlights the gaps in our system that fail to protect the victims of domestic violence, leaving many feeling desperate, isolated, afraid, and unheard. Now, one of the things we do want to talk about is the barriers. So there's common barriers. So one of them is the funding. So the funding is causing not having like the resources at the shelter is full. Minimal counseling. We have very few counselors here locally that address trauma. There are some counselors. I've talked to actually a couple of them. A lot of them will deal with healing and grief. They don't have to deal with trauma. And in some cases, when you're dealing with the trauma bond, as it's called, when you work with sort of whether have narcissistic behaviors, the trauma bond is what we need to address. It's similar to Stockholm syndrome, but it's not the same. It's very similar. And until you understand it, it's hard to address. Some of it's the legal aid and outreach programs. There's also the competition for limited funding. So you see a lot of shelters looking for funding for shelters. This is the public awareness. So there's lack of education and understanding the dynamics of domestic violence, whether it's the physical, emotional, or financial barriers and the impact What I encountered a lot, even I encounter now, is the victim blaming and the harmful attitudes that come with domestic violence. Also, the legal barriers. We have very weak laws, and even worse, enforcement. It's a joke. If you look at our enforcement, it's no wonder we have such um, the large amount of domestic violence is unreported because it's a joke. With even what I'm seeing now as a victim myself, and the lack of consequences. Plus the difficulty trying to understand the legal system and the paperwork. How do I navigate through this chaos? Also, the limited access to legal assistance. So whether it's civil lawyers or even the district attorney, there's very limited access to anyone that's able to help you with the situation. I also notice there's a public stigma. There's also embarrassment and vulnerability. Even for me, trying to openly discuss this. Yes, I'm fighting for justice. Yes, I'm fighting for my community. Yes, I'm fighting for other victims that are like me that have dealt with this. But the lack of trust due to the negative experience, you do not have a lot of trust for people. You don't. Because you know, you're my own police department. And I think that's important to consider. A lot of people victim blame. Well, why can't allow it to happen? Like I sat there and said, please punch me in the eye while I'm driving at 45 miles an hour. This will well, Um, so I think that's important to think about. It's the public statement. Until you've lived it, you don't understand. The other ones are the systematic issues. So these social norms to support violence. You should hear people say, "Well, did you check it? Did you deal with it? Did you go and address the issue?" And then the acceptance of the aggression. So be a man, step up. You don't be the first one to punch. Or be punch back. Make sure you punch. And the aggression, that shouldn't be a way of dealing with a situation with a spouse or a partner or a family member, especially as adults, or even children. You shouldn't strike children to the point where they have bruises and black eyes. If they're not behaving or they're not doing what they need to be doing, such as a kid ran out of the street the first time, yeah, you better believe he had consequences. I assure you he didn't do it again, and then the consequences included bruises. I would never do that to my children. That's important. So you don't, go there and try to choke somebody. Don't put their hand on their face so they can't breathe. There are other ways of dealing with issues than that. So what are my recommendations? What is the end of talking this on for no reason? Right? There's more to this, which is why it's part of the social work program. One is we need to centralize or standardize our data collection amongst all law enforcement and social work agencies. So not all law enforcement report it, not all of them report it the same. And not all are using the same data when they submitted it. So I think that's important to realize that we need to centralize and standardize all of that information. I also think we should have mandated reporting and enhanced investigations. Mandated reporting makes victims, I don't want to say necessarily makes victims out of victims, but making them reporting it when victims are too scared to report the violence. And you know what? This isn't okay. And we're going to see, especially if they're going to do something about it. Now, if they're not going to do anything about it, they're not going to prosecute. Don't make the situation worse. But if they're actually going to prosecute because they tried strangling somebody and there's proof of it and they know they did it, arrest them and get that person off the streets. Don't allow the abuser to stay there with the victim to continue to hurt them. That's what I also think we need enhanced training for law enforcement and increased time in prosecution. So when my police department, as I mentioned, came out, victim blaming, that's all they did. Victim blaming is awful. And so I think it's important to have also a timely prosecution. So if they are doing this, let's get them off the streets before they kill that person, before they hurt them again. I think that is very, very important because we live in fear. I live in fear every day. I do not know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I shouldn't have to live in fear. Um, we also have to look at educational awareness, make sure people understand and have awareness of domestic violence, healthy relationship skills, how to positively address and deal with anger. So, what works best for the person when it comes to dealing with anger? When you're angry, how do you respond? And what's the best way to respond safely? So I think that's what's important. So my recommendation is one, obviously, to increase prosecution, because I don't think these people should be walking the streets. And there's no point in having Claire's law if they're not going to prosecute, because if I go in and want to check somebody that I'm considering a relationship with, what good is it if they were never prosecuted and they have a record? Or there's police reports of them, right, and pictures and videos of them attacking somebody, but yet they were never convicted, so you can't tell me about it. But maybe they're in suspicion of being investigated for murder of their ex-wife. I would think I should be able to get that information. But I can't. So there's no point in having laws such as Claire's law if we're not going to be prosecuting people and making that information readily available to potential future victims. I think we should have a focused, dedicated approach to domestic violence prosecution, which includes specialized units, trainings, and victim support services, because I think it's important. Yeah, I have a victim advocate. I talk to her maybe once, maybe twice a month, if that. She'll wait a week or two before she calls me back. Yeah, week. I didn't say days or hours, weeks. She's one person. She's handling, a caseload, I'm assuming, if 150 people. And if someone's on trial and they actually are prosecuting the case, which would be surprising, um, then she's tied up in court all day long during that time. And that makes her unavailable for the other 149 people that are looking for her. So I think that's where I think the increased victim support services is critical, to help people get connected to the services that they need. And then lastly, I saw that our Attorney General here in California recently asked um, for an incident review task force, which I think is interesting. I thought it was very interesting when it comes to domestic violence and wanting a review force task force. So I'm going to find out more information about this because this is somewhat new. So it's still evolving since it just came out in January, and we're now in February, towards the middle of February. So this is evolving, and I'm interested in having that implemented and see what task force that we can put together in the state of California, especially in my county, when it comes to dealing with domestic violence and preventing other people become victims and dealing with some of the fear that I'm dealing with. So this is just kind of what I wanted to share my story, my information with you. I think it's very important when it comes to healing, and dealing with this and what steps we can take to protect each other, whether it's my community and my county. As a council member, I think it's important for my community to be protected. As a social worker, I think it's important that we have services available to help the community. And that's my goal, is to help my community as well as myself. And thank you for listening, paying attention to this long. I apologize. But I wish you the best in service. If there's anything you need, I'll put resources down. Feel free to reach out to the Stanislaus Haven. They're here to help you. Our Haven is Stanislaus County. We also have a family resource justice center, and they're also available here. They have great resources to help you if you're in this situation and you also need assistance. Take time to protect yourself.